the Mahoning Valley Daily Podcast.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Mahoning Valley Daily Podcast. It is the 7th of October, and I am your host, Ron Cabuno. Thank you very much for tuning in to your voice of reason in the valley. Today on the show, we are going to talk about the trouble that the Columbus Zoo is facing currently. Ohio's best-known home for exotic animals and wild birds is in a bit of hot water right now because of accreditation issues that they are having based on practices that they have had all the way back to the 80s. But first, something a little more local. Unfortunately, the Boardman Spartans' home football game against the Ursuline Fightin' Irish has been canceled this Friday due to COVID contraction on the Boardman squad. Looks like those mask mandates aren't working and they should just get rid of them altogether. Just kidding. That's ridiculous. Of course you're going to have COVID infections, and they're doing the best they can by stopping this game to stop the spread. It's an unfortunate reality of where we find ourselves right now, but I don't see this happening next year. It's just something that we're dealing with in 2021 when we're trying to get this normalcy back underway. I believe last I read, the Ursuline football team was already able to reschedule with somebody else. I hope Boardman is just as fortunate. And of course, in a related note, there's more news about mask mandates locally here. YSU is in the news talking about how the faculty does not want to have a vaccine mandate when they possibly get rolled out in the future. I don't know where I stand on this because I believe that you should have some outs for certain maybe religious exemptions or medical exemptions if they are pre-existing and well determined in the past. I think I saw last week that the New York public school system was not allowing for any exemptions whatsoever. I think that's totally bogus. You've seen that when they put the mandates in place for vaccinations, that the participation rate goes up past 90%. So I think that's all you really need, because what they've been doing is they've been making the onus on people to get tested either daily or bi-weekly. Basically inconvenient enough that if you're on the fence whatsoever, you're going to end up getting that vaccine. I think that is the best approach. Not giving anybody any possible outs for whatever conditions they may currently have. I don't think that's very fair in a workplace or in a school setting. So we will see how that goes. The story was basically about mask mandates at YSU, not vaccinations, but they are going hand in hand right now with essentially what an entity or an organization is allowed to ask their students, enrollees, or employees to do. But the main focus today is going to be on the Columbus Zoo. I don't know if you guys saw this, but a little bit ago there was a documentary that came out. I believe it came out back in July, and it's called The Conservation Game. And it focuses on the famous spokesperson for the Columbus Zoo, Jack Hanna. Wild Jack Hanna, as he was known, as he would go on Johnny Carson or all those other late night shows with those animals supposedly from the Columbus Zoo, show them off, and that would basically get people to come to the zoo. And as a spokesperson, they found out that those animals that he was bringing on TV, they were gotten from fairly nefarious sources and places that they do not consider to be kosher in the zoological circles that the Columbus Zoo usually tries to find itself. Now, Mike Tyson's tiger aside, there are many, many other large cat owners and wild exotic pet owners in the state of Ohio. And that's because Ohio has they did have some of the most lax laws in terms of trading these animals in the country. So one of the most famous places was actually an Amish market here, I believe, in Northeast Ohio, where people from all over the world would flock to buy giraffes and stuff out of an Amish barn. Absolutely the craziest stuff. You never would believe it, but it was actually true. And so these type of places where there's very little regulatory oversight over very, very sometimes protected, endangered, or at least non-native species, those have been frowned upon and they've been cracked down on. And if you consider yourself to be a zoo of repute, of any kind, you do not mingle with those folks. But it turns out those were the animals that Jack Hanna was bringing on TV, not actual residents of the zoo that he worked for. So needless to say that this documentary comes out. Next thing you know, the zoo cuts ties with all of these breeders and all the other sources of animals that are under question. And then they get inspected and they lose their accreditation. And it sounds to me as though this is a punitive loss of accreditation because of their transgressions in the past. A spokesman for the zoo said that at the time of the search and the review, everything that they were doing was above board. And that probably is the case because that documentary put their feet in the hot water. So maybe everything was on the up and up when the investigators got there, but the news of what they had done had just come out and they had never really had to pay a price. I don't want to see the Columbus Zoo go down. I don't want to see them lose the exalted status that I'm sure thousands upon thousands of people worked to ensure over the decades. However, even Penn State and USC football faced close to the death penalty when their transgressions were brought out to light, no matter how few people were involved in the act. And guess what? They still have football programs today that a lot of people still want to go to. So I think that unfortunately Columbus is going to have to take the hit. They are currently appealing their loss of accreditation, and I don't think that that's going to get reversed, and I don't think it should. I think they should probably have to wait a year. Whatever type of penalties come with not being part of that group will go, whatever type of penalties come with not being affiliated will then be brought upon them, and they will hopefully learn their lesson and never do anything like this in the future. I just know that in the past couple decades, we've really started to rethink our relationship to animals and how they should be treated. And if we're not going to be able to follow those rules on a neighborly basis in terms of puppy mills, or we're not going to be able to follow those at the highest levels like the zoo, there needs to be consequences. Just like many, many of our fellow humans, animals are considered to be vulnerable populations. Sometimes they can't help themselves, and sometimes they get put in very terrible situations by the people that we entrust to take care of them. On that note, we will finish it up for today's podcast. And let's just say this. If you have any thoughts about going to a zoo to take your kids to see the animals or to go see them your grown-ass self, may I suggest going to Noah's Lost Ark or any of these other places that are actually quite local that take in all the unwanted big game cats and exotic wildlife that people buy legally or illegally and then just don't want, and they don't have a home for them anymore, and they go to these places, they get treated very well for the remainder of their lives, and you're still allowed to go see them and enjoy yourselves. So that is my recommendation to you guys today. Thank you very much, be well, and we will talk to you tomorrow.